Nice tarp, Farhan, to start. By the way, looking sharp there. What was the day like?
What? What do you mean?
That's it. I like it. It's nice.
It was tarp. That's a little strong. Come on. It's a fashionable pattern, my friend. It's not quite the plaid you're wearing, but I'm also not in Saskatchewan. It was a long day. There you go. It was a long day. Woke up at 5 a.m. and I was staying in a hotel downtown, and then got to the arena and they put us in a suite, so we, in terms of getting the right shot that early in the morning. So we're in there. First on-air segment was at about 6 a.m. and then just kind of went from there. For us in the regions, it kind of becomes much ado about nothing if your team's not directly involved, right? Like if you're not making some trades early on, unless you're the Leafs, we don't talk about you as much. So we did a couple of setup hits, and then after that, I got a little quiet. I actually went to sleep. I took a nap. Not sure if you saw it on Twitter because apparently my cameraman saw it and decided to send it back to Toronto, and they posted it. And
oh no,
it was good fun. Yeah, it was good fun. Yeah, it's okay.
What trade, what move today jumps out at you as very interesting?
Well, look, the one that everybody was anticipating, and that was Carolina and Dallas getting the Rantanen deal done. And what was interesting is that, I think as late as last night, we were hearing that Dallas was prepared to get to that $12 million number, and Rantanen wasn't going there. And then all of a sudden that changed today. And that's what he took after originally talking about wanting $14 million, which I just don't know why anybody would pay a winger, right? I mean, I don't know that there's a winger in the league that's worth that. Even Leon Draisaitl, who can play on McDavid's wing, has also been pretty good down the middle, right? And generally is on his own line, even with subpar wingers, and can get it done. So just to see a winger jump out the page looking for 14 surprised me. But I mean, you go to Texas and it's a no state income tax state. 12 carries more there than it does in a lot of other states, and certainly in Canada. So that was the big one. And the reason for that is it held up a lot of other moves. I think Vancouver was impacted by that because you got to get the Rantanen thing done before everybody understands who is now out and maybe looking for a winger in the second tier, because you missed out on Rantanen in the first tier. So by the time that got done, it kind of left a few other pieces up in the air through the deadline.
Was there anything that you thought Vancouver would do, really?
Well, look, there was a lot of debate about what would happen with the Canucks, in that we knew they weren't buyers, right, in the traditional sense, that a team that's only going to add. So we thought there was a chance that they would move on from some of their pending unrestricted free agents, the Brock Bessers, the Pius Suiters, the Derek Forwards of the world, and then take those assets and try to flip them quickly for a player that could help them now that had some term on their deal, so they could look at as assistants for next year and beyond. I mean, when you look at the offseason now, this team's accrued like $13.5 million in cap space. They could go out and add, but it's going to be hard to add the pieces they need in free agency. They're going to have to do it via a trade then. So people thought they might try to get ahead of that work and get some of that done now. And, when you look at Jim Rutherford and his track record, I think he's had 25 trades on deadline day since 2006, which is the most of any GM. We just didn't expect him to be that patient when all was said and done.
You've been around the industry a long time. I know buddies that played, so I know but you in the industry, what is your take on how hard it is now for some Canadian markets, almost all of them, but a Winnipeg, where guys just don't want to come here?
Yeah, I do get it, right? When you remember the narrative around Edmonton pre-McDavid was as bad as I've ever seen it for a Canadian team. And then all of a sudden you get McDavid and you get a new building and people start having different conversations, right? People don't want to go to Calgary. I mean, people generally like Calgary, the city. It's well regarded, but nobody wants to play in that building. Winnipeg, the city takes a bad rap. So especially, whether you're American or Canadian, a lot of people don't want to go there. Now, if you're a pending unrestricted free agent, why wouldn't you? right? Like I get why you might not want to settle your family down there and go, on a 5-year
Yeah.
deal. Like I do get that part of it from a free agency standpoint, but that's the number one team in the league, or as good as there is in the league. Why wouldn't you just go for a couple months and try to get a Stanley Cup run in and even increase your value for the next deal, which you can take to go elsewhere? So that part of it, I try to wrap my head around. But yeah, I mean, some of that is there, right? And whether you're Canadian or American, right? Like there are guys that don't want the pressure of the market, that don't want to play in the cold weather. But I'll tell you, like last year's a perfect example. When you talk to American players and, with JT Miller and Quinn Hughes and Connor Garland and those guys who witnessed what it was like in Vancouver, you kind of get blown away because an American city can't offer you that when you're in the playoffs. Just the excitement, around the city. And Vancouver doesn't have the same baggage some of those other cities have because it's generally regarded differently as a city. But, between the taxes, between the weather, yeah, it's tough for a lot of Canadian markets.
Farhan, just because I have you, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask because you're in Vancouver. And I know it's a little bit early and I don't want to be reactionary. But with the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson thing, did they trade the wrong guy?
I don't think so. And I say that because really, I don't know that there was a choice there. It felt by the time that it happened that it was either going to be pick between the two. It was either going to be trade them both or trade JT Miller. Right? Like that's kind of how it was going to be, because I think there really were some concerns about some of the things that happened and how over the top it was. This wasn't simply alpha behavior of a player, trying to act like a tough guy and say what he needed to do and offer some tough love. It did, it felt like it went a little beyond that. And so I think keeping JT Miller was never part of their thought process when they decided something had to be done. It was either trade JT or trade them both. And ultimately, both still may get traded, right? If Pettersson doesn't show signs of life before the end of the year, I think he's going to get traded before July 1st.
After what we've seen today, we talked about this earlier with Cam Moon as well. Those two Florida teams, right? Now,
wow.
like who does the guy sprinkle on there?
Yeah, when you look at what Tampa did in the last couple of days, and then what Florida did in the finishing piece with a guy like Brad Marchand, who still is productive, right? He's not an elite scorer, but he's still scoring at a reasonable rate, and he's a guy that once he gets healthy here is going to be able to really help a team in the playoffs because he's used to those games. He's used to those moments. They don't get too big for him. The best part about it is that he could see the Leafs in the first round again. Like, wouldn't that be great? Right? So the Leafs are like, oh, we're done with that. Oh, no, you're not. You might be done with the Bruins, but you still got to deal with Brad Marchand. So, if you're an anti-Toronto guy, which I tend to lean from time to time, it is kind of ironic and you chuckle a little bit. So, look, there's no doubt. And again, places where the tax situation is favorable, places where you can go and you can have success and chase a cup and nobody knows who you are. Right. And that's just the way it is. And, when you talk to a lot of these players, there really is a feeling of everybody kind of wants to play in the Canadian market once, but then eventually they want to go where they can succeed and be anonymous doing it. And you can have that in those markets. Right. Both those teams would be absolute favorites right now. Whoever comes out of that division in the playoffs, it's going to be hard to knock them off.
Where do you see Marchand slotting into that lineup? Is it in terms of projections, where does he fit?
Well, we just imagine a line that had Tkachuk, Marchand, and Sam Bennett, right? Talk about a difficult line to play against. So whether or not they go that way or not, I think you're going to see that at times when they want to close out games or when they want to change the temperature of a game, call it the rat line. And I know they throw rats out in Florida all the time. They'll become one of the most disliked teams in the league in a second if they aren't already.
Yeah. Man, it's so crazy. And then you got the chases going on. St. Louis. I didn't think St. Louis was going to do anything. They're right there, and that market and how much that team means. And Schen's still got term. So I thought, if anything, we were going to see Luke going back there.
Yeah, it's funny because Luke doesn't make as much and doesn't have as much term, so that almost makes him a more valuable asset at this time of year, right? Because you don't have to invest long term. And in the case of Braden Shen, because I know his name got mentioned here in Vancouver, what is he, 32, 33? And he has term, like that deal's not going to age well, and you're seeing the decline in his game. Could he help a team this year in the playoffs? Sure he could, but do you want to invest in that even with the cap raising going forward? Probably not. And I think because he's got term and he's theirs, and St. Louis is right there, I think in the end, they weren't going to part with him unless the deal was really, really compelling. And nobody wanted to give that compelling deal because he's got term and where he's at in his career. So probably best that he just winds up there and tries to get that team into the playoffs.
All right, let's shift here. Kind of teased this earlier in the show, and then I mentioned it to you that we're aware of a Saskatchewan fellow that has a strong case to put his name forth to be the CFL commissioner. This is
Is it
serious,
you? It's got to be you.
This is as serious as my face gets. If you're watching that, no, this is legit. This guy's way smarter than me. Let's start.
Is it my
there.
guy Len Antonini? Who is it? Is it my boy Lenny, who just runs Regina Minor football and does such a great job there?
No, he does a great job there. This guy is a big time numbers, data, that realm. He's not a former player. He gets it. Now, have you heard anything on where they are with the chase, the whatever you want to call it, for a commissioner?
Courtship.
Yeah, like what? This is weird.
Yeah, truthfully, look, I'm not going to lie. Like the last week and a half, I probably haven't paid a lot of attention to it just because I've been pretty caught up on the NHL side of the gig here. But what was surprising to me was just how slow the process had been going into Grey Cup, coming out of Grey Cup. They hadn't even picked their search committee. They hadn't even narrowed down a job description. They were, it felt like 4 months into the search, they were still in the really early phases of the search. I do understand that things have picked up in the last 3 weeks, maybe 3 to 4 weeks in that range. But in terms of who your mystery candidate is in Regina, I couldn't tell you who it is and if that's going to be the right guy for the job.
just because playing devil's advocate is what I do, is it an issue, or could it be an issue of that either there's a lack of quality applicants or a lack of general interest that nobody really wants it?
No, I don't think so. I think when you're paying $500,000 to $1 million a year, people are interested in the job. There's no doubt about it. So I don't know. And having seen the process in the last 2 to 3 commissioner searches, there's always a lot of interest for this job. It's a hard job, right? From a commissioner standpoint, you're not dealing with billions. You're dealing with millions, and you're also dealing with 9 owners. And sometimes when you deal with 30, it becomes easier. You think it's harder, but you can't have a little bit of power, 2 or 3 guys can be real power brokers and centralize that power. And that happens in this league often. There's a couple of guys that carry a big stick, and that becomes really, really difficult for a commissioner to navigate around that, as opposed to, even if you're a guy like Jerry Jones in the NFL, you're one of 30. And you just can't necessarily have the power that you want. So it's a tough job, there's no doubt. But again, I don't think there's going to be a lack of people interested.
One of the things, I've heard a few things from his plan, so I'll get your take on a couple of these. Obviously, a big one is expansion, and not getting to 10 teams, but maybe getting to 12 to 14 based on governments helping out, and then based on not 20 to 30,000 seat stadiums to smaller stadiums where you're getting other revenue sources. And I've always, I think Quebec City, the instant rivalry there, where we can't build a big enough stadium. Okay. Maritimes can't. I don't know enough about Victoria personally. But that's one thing. And so that's where I almost feel for this time around, do you go not former player, not tied to the league? You go with more of a numbers, data to take this league maybe to a next level?
Well, like I don't think Randy was brought in because he was a former player. I mean, he worked in the financial sector, had a pretty good resume on that side. I think the fact that he was a former player was seen as a bit of a bonus, and that it was, going to be the perfect blend of everything. And if you look at the commissioners before that, certainly former player wasn't an important thing. I think expansion is important. Like I think they need to get to 10. They need to have a fifth game of inventory for a number of different reasons, and they could do a lot of different things with that. And I've heard the idea of go smaller, which is fine. But then you came back with, we'll find different revenue streams to make up for that. I don't know where that comes from, right? And so that's got to be item number one. And that really is where things didn't go the way they wanted with Randy, right? New revenue streams, despite the fact the salary cap is going up. I think overall, I think that was a real question. So because while some revenue went up, expenses went up with it. So profits didn't go up. So that was a real problem, right? So you're seeing the league office cut back in certain areas and things like that. So I think if they can find new revenues, that's the main thing. If you go smaller, you really do need to change your economic model, because without going smaller, you have to change your, like, are you going to go to the US, right? Because we know what the markets are that can sustain it, right? And when we look at the Maritimes and we look at Quebec City, from a pure number standpoint, those markets could sustain expansion if they had the right facility. So now the other option is, does the league want to invest? And do they want to help build that stadium? I don't get that appetite from the governors and presidents that I talk to, but that's another way to skin that cat. So I worry about going smaller, because I don't think those instant revenue streams in some of those smaller markets are going to be obvious.
Because I think the one thing that he also mentioned was the TV deal's up in 2026, which is huge for any league. Now, where's TV going? What's the data show? And you work for TSN, right? Where's TV going? Where's the TV deal going? Is it a TV deal? Is it a streaming deal? And it is a something else deal. There's a lot. And then he is a big proponent. Here's a question. Do you think the league's done enough to embrace gambling?
No, I don't. Right. The fact that it's opened up, we haven't seen them lean into that. I know they're trying to on the fantasy side, but it hasn't led to the level of direct revenue that they thought it would by this point, right? Because we're 4 years deep into, when gambling was legal, 3 years deep to when gambling was legalized. So, they were talking at the time about places in stadiums where you could live bet, and, different technologies in seats and things like that they could do to increase engagement, like a fifth game, and not just improves your fantasy, but it gives you a fifth game to bet on, right? Yeah. On any given week. So, there's a lot of advantage to that. But I to your original question, I think the league could still do a better job of taking full advantage of what gambling can offer. And
then the other thing that we talked about this yesterday with Sharky on here is one of the plans is Ticketmaster. Without Ticketmaster, the teams make an extra at least $1 million each. So going away
without Ticketmaster, okay.
Yeah, so going a different way, different platform where now you build a platform. Maybe it's more of a it was actually it kind of blew me away. So I'll give you more info when I'm allowed to. I don't even know all the info, but it's just I just feel like with that, for me as an outsider and just a guy thinking, it's like your TV deal, like that isn't that far away, and that is such a big piece. So to not have there's got to be discussions going on a commissioner.
Oh, yeah. And TSN will have an exclusive negotiating window at one point. And, there's a lot of debate out there about whether or not the best thing is for the league to stay exclusive with their TV partners or try to get more people involved. And so, I can certainly speak to it from the standpoint of a guy that is employed by the network right now. And, I think we do a lot for the league as the exclusive partner. I know everybody wants more, but there is an ROI when it comes to some of these things, on the production side. But, obviously, I think we do a good job. I think numbers are up. People talk about streaming. So out here in Vancouver, I paid while I was still alive. I'm a college football guy. I paid a lot of attention to the Pac-12. And in certain areas, like you're just not going to get the audience for streaming. You just aren't. So when you have a television deal that is primarily based on streaming and that gets presented to you, a lot of people get nervous because you won't get the subscriptions. Now, if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC and you have a heavy streaming component to what you're doing, that you have no problem. You know people are going to buy. You know people are going to buy. So in Saskatchewan, people would buy, right? In Western Canada, people would probably buy. In other parts of the country, would they buy? I don't know. If you had a fifth game, could you give that to a different network, right, on any given weekend so that they also get a game of the week and have a reason to invest? There's a lot of, there's a lot of ideas as to what that can do, but none of them are bad, right? So, and I think in some of those cases, you've got to try. Right, like if you sign a short-term streaming deal and you decide that it doesn't work after year 3, like you wouldn't do it after year 1. I don't know that you need like a 10-year MLS Apple deal, but I do think you've got to try because people think streaming is the solution for everything. For some it is, for some it isn't, and until you go down that road, I don't know that you'll know.
Yeah, the trying. All right, Farhan, thanks so much for today. You go get a nap. We hear you need a nap.
You know what? Like literally, I pulled over on the highway and went to sleep for like 15 minutes. I just needed a power nap. I got to come on with Barney, and I better be sharp. So I need to sleep for a few minutes just so I can stay awake for the entire segment. Right. No joke. I do that every once in a while. I need a power nap.
Right on. I like it. I'm a power nap guy. I'm a Napoleon guy. I call him Napoleon naps. That's how he fought the war.
There you go.
It? Little 5-minute, 10-minute naps.
Da Vinci sleeps.
There you go.
Yeah. Thanks, Farhan. Have a good weekend.
See you, boys.